So let's just jump right into it, George. Who do you mostly represent at this time as far as net lease? Are you representing buyers? Are you representing sellers? And what kind of geographic footprint are you getting most of your clients from at this time?
Okay. Well, I'm glad you asked that, Chris, because there's a lot of buyers in 1031 exchanges or so that may go and they start looking in the databases and they jump. So I actually work with, majority of my clients are buyers. I do some listings, and they're primarily from repeat clients that are looking to sell their properties. But I work with a lot of buyers, especially within the 1031 realm. I am, knock on wood here, I have never missed a 1031 deadline. Awesome. We have always found the right properties. Pardon?
Right. I said me either. Good for us.
I know. Now, I've come close. Don't get me wrong. And that was primarily the client waiting to think there's a better property coming on board, and we actually ended up buying, or they ended up buying a property that we'd showed them about a month earlier. But they kept waiting for something better to happen. So we waited to the last minute, to get that in. But most of my buyers, I work with different exchange companies, different accountants, different CPAs. A lot of them come from the west side of LA, through Beverly Hills, through Santa Monica, Brentwood, Pacific Palisades. They're investors. They buy properties throughout the nation. I've sold properties in over 35 states. Working to do all 50 of them. I've been doing this now for I've been in real estate now for over 30 years. Yeah, right out of college.
25. So you got 5 years ahead of me. When did you start? Early 90s?
1988. Actually, late 87. So yeah, late 87, but for the most part, 88. Beginning of 88.
Do you remember the late 80s? That was kind of like I remember we were building some apartments at that time. The economy was starting to slightly slow down, and Texas was in trouble. So you had all these people coming from Texas to work in California because the oil had just kind of collapsed. I remember that from the late 80s.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that, actually. I was at a company called Kennedy Wilson when I first got out of college, and we were doing real estate auctions. And a lot of these were distressed properties that we were working with, and I was assigned Texas as my territory. So, we auctioned off thousands of properties, and I was part of the closing department, so I oversaw all the closings, really learned the details of how other states operate, whether it's with more of a title state versus escrow state, things like that. But I did a ton of work in Texas. I loved it there. We actually have an office out that way in Dallas right now for our company that we started. I started this company 16 years ago. We prior to that we'd started some commercial brokerage companies for different other Sotheby's, which was actually originally DBL, but then Sotheby's acquired it. And then I was working with Fred Sands for quite a bit, one of the good old school guys. He was one of my mentors, and then Alan Long, one of my big mentors as well.
Did you say Sands? Sands?
Sands.
Or who are you with?
I went from Kennedy Wilson to Fred Sands. We started a real estate auction division for him, and I think within 2 years we're the number two real estate auction company on the West Coast. Just getting out there, I was young, so the only thing I had in my benefit was working hard.
A lot of piss and vinegar and energy more than maybe wisdom, but sometimes that'll carry through, right? That extra energy.
Absolutely, and this was the best part was I learned what happened in the Texas market in the late 80s and how they were in trouble and what was going on. And that translated, if you recall, the S&L crisis in the early 90s.
You remember Keaton? There was a guy named Keaton. I think it was Lincoln Savings. And
Lincoln Savings.
beating him up with a purse. I remember that, and that was the bank had failed, and that was really defying that early 1990 recession. Was Keaton, I think, was his name.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah,
well,
but yeah.
Our recessions, it shows we've been through a couple different battles. We've been early 90s, 2009, and now the Corona recession, I guess you could call it.
Totally.
I was glad that we had an opportunity to work on that KFC deal together. That was awesome. Your client called me, I would say, around March, and they had a very tight time frame. They had to get the KFC deal done in like 30 or 40 days, and we were able to deliver that loan. And I actually met your client for lunch. We got it all together. We went to the fish market down here in Del Mar, put everything together. Great couple, really enjoyed the process. So now, when you're going for more listings or buyers right now? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the majority of my business really is buyers. I mean, I do have a member of my team who's concentrating on listings now. He actually is a old churches franchisee. He owned 35 chickens on the East Coast in Ohio, and sold off the business, and then came in, wanted to get into the real estate side. So he's really focusing on that. So he's he's doing that. But I mean, I love working with the buyers because I love finding the right property. The best thing we talk about the whole coronavirus recession that you were just mentioning, kind of, and when this all happened back in March and in mid-March, early April was when all the tenants were, contacting all the landlords, not knowing what was happening, what was going on. I was in contact with all of my clients that purchased properties, and we did a lot of due diligence because, in a single-tenant net lease environment, all single-tenant net leases are not necessarily the same. And they're really only as good as the property and, the guarantor. So, for me, with my clients, it's always been location driven, and I'm proud to say that with all my clients, all but one, every single tenant paid their rent in full through the whole entire coronavirus issues.
That's
and
really
the one that didn't pay the rent in full paid half. They asked for half months off for 3 months, but it was a very large corporation that was their policy. Across the board, whether the location was doing well or not, they just were going in. They owned over 1,000 locations. They're a franchisee, they are the largest franchisee for a large international chain, publicly traded. But it was their policy just to go out there and request this from everybody, so we worked with them.
George, not to interrupt you, but the one metaphor I always give clients when I go and meet them or do go-to meeting or meet them in my office is a tenant or guarantor is kind of like few people. So if you have one person that is has a net worth of $1 million and they're spending $1 million, and another person that has a net worth of $100 million and they're spending $1 million, which person, A or B, would you want to have as your tenant?
Yeah.
B, right? Because
absolutely,
A is out of money in 1 year, and B is going to be out of money in 100 years. So B can continue paying the rent because they have kind of a war chest. I don't know. That's the way I always look at it. If you have a weak tenant with no war chest, they could be out of money very quickly. So then you got to fall back on the location, right? If this tenant doesn't make it, how hard is it going to be for you to re-tenant the building? And is the rent at equal to or below market when you go to re-tenant this building? And the rent
absolutely
sales, right?
Absolutely. That's why we take into account everything from demographics, growth of demographics, to the traffic counts, both income as well as the amount of people living in the area. And then we look at the competition. And then in specific cases, such as in San Diego, Los Angeles, Santa Monica, we look at, is the asset irreplaceable? Is there a moratorium on fast food drive-thrus? So because of that, we know that may add value to it. You know, I worked on, one of the things we also do with landlords is we work with renegotiating leases. A lot of times with the clients that have purchased buildings from us, we come in, it's time to renegotiate a lease or restructure that lease. And, you know, there were cases where, you know, I had a client one time that was down the street, and I won't say the name of it because I had to sign confidentiality clauses as far as the tenant. But I can tell you that this particular client was an institutional client. There was a trust. They had to have appraisals done. And, you know, they had the appraisers coming in saying at that time the value was about $180,000, $185,000 a year for a ground lease. And, of course, the tenant, which was a huge corporation, they had their own analysis done. And sure enough, they came in saying, we'll offer you $185,000. You know, the one thing that the appraisers didn't take into consideration was current market conditions. This is a fast food drive-through, corporate-run store, no franchisee fees. It had over 45,000 cars per day in one of the higher demographic neighborhoods. And it was right next to an off-ramp off of the 405 freeway in Los Angeles, and it was irreplaceable.
That's beautiful property. Beautiful
yep,
property.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
let me ask you something, George, real quick. When these tenants are going to look at like a QSR location, are they saying, okay, we think, you know, our store sales are going to be $1.5 million a year, and based on that, we want to see a rent of about 7%. So what would that be? 100,000 something?
Yeah,
is that how they rent, or do they say, "Oh, we're in a higher end area, we need to pay more rent," or do they go off for rent to sales? So
combination of the factor. It's a combination of the factor. In that almost most QSRs have a rent to sales ratio that they try and hit and they try and look at, and
that would be 105. 105
yep.
if the store sales are doing $1.5 million at a 7 rent to sales.
5 out of 7.
In Beverly Hills, I would imagine that's pretty hard unless you're thinking, hey, we're going to have way more sales because we're in this very dense area or Los Angeles area.
Well, Beverly Hills is unique in that they will never have a drive-through. City will never approve it.
I want to say, I did the
area.
Chick-fil-A. You know the Chick-fil-A, La Cienega, and the 10. I financed that.
Just
and I did
just off of Beverly Hills, off of yeah, absolutely. Now, what's interesting about that is that certain businesses have different models, and they also, as far as rent to sales ratios, like for instance, a Starbucks, which is all corporate, there's no franchisee fees, and in addition to that, their margins are extremely high compared to, you know, it's coffee and water and dairy.
Okay.
There's no meat products, very minimal spoilage, things like that. So they have, they can afford to pay a higher rent to sales ratio, and they do for the prime locations. In addition to that, there are, you know, the beautiful part about the QSR industry is that they all pretty much know what kind of sales they're going to do based upon the traffic counts, based upon the demographics in the area, the density, the income levels, all of that. They can tell within a few percentage points what their sales are going to be. And then knowing that, they'll come in. You know, for instance, you mentioned Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has the highest sales per unit of any QSR. And traditionally, they do over $4 million a year in sales.
That's huge. That's huge.
On average unit. It's almost twice as much as their nearest competitor. Yeah.
That's really huge.
You know, it's 2.6 million, 2.7 million, I think, was the average McDonald's in sales a year.
So
now,
Starbucks, you're you're saying Starbucks can pay more rent because their costs are less, or a higher rent to sales because their costs
Exactly.
are less.
Pay higher rent for a prime location, absolutely. But Chick-fil-A though, because they know their average store sales are 4 million, or that, and for areas like in parts of areas of the West Coast, some of them are doing $7-8 million a year in sales, which is ridiculous numbers. But because of that, they can pay $300,000 a year. They know that, as opposed to a KFC, which may only do $1.6 million on average a year in sales. And then a KFC has higher margins, so we're looking at, they're probably looking at about an 8% sales to rent margin, rent to sales ratio, which is healthy. 10% is actually not bad, but their preference would probably be around 8%.
Right.
Especially in Los Angeles, where costs are higher for your minimum wage and things like that, so your employment costs are a little bit higher.
So where's your office located?
We're located in Brentwood, California, well, a suburb of Los Angeles in Brentwood, California.
Okay, right in Brentwood. Okay. We just did a deal with a mother and her daughter, and we represented them on a Dollar General CBS deal, and they lived in that area. And we met up at ICSC in LA, and all I did the whole time was put in offers to represent them on both the financing and the purchase. We did an all cash CBS deal. We went hard, 150,000 at contract, if you can believe that. But that was the only way we could do the deal, and we closed in a couple weeks. It was a little crazy.
Surprisingly, it's still a hot market, and I get put in some of those situations because the best properties out there, they will literally sell within a week. So you're going to want to be able to react very quickly. You're going to want to be able to go hard if you need to and pay cash if you need to. Refinance later, with a good person, good lender that you have. But it's interesting. It's an interesting marketplace, and I tell that to my clients right now, even because there was especially if you're looking for something that is out of the norm. Like for instance, right now the Walgreens leases. You mentioned CVS. Walgreens leases typically are flat for the initial term. They have increases in the option periods. In addition to that, the majority of them are really double net, not triple net. So, I actually had a client that, the nice part was they were looking for a triple net Walgreens with increases every 5 years and at least 15 years on the initial term. Now, there's probably maybe a dozen of those out there, or five, there's 100 plus Walgreens out there that are for sale. There was maybe 5 or 6 that actually had that type of lease structure, and all of them were selling within a week or two. So, we were able to find one off market, put an offer on it, and get it tied up pretty quickly. And a lot of that had to do with just cash. Go in. We're going to do this. We can close quickly because the seller's already done all the due diligence. They could transfer it to them. It was a good sale, but it's hard. A lot of times it is hard to find those, or where you need to have the cash up front, and then either that or then refinance afterwards. So got to be able to react quick.
That's awesome. And that had increases. You said that had rental increases, right?
It had rental increases every 5 years. And initial, it was actually a restructuring of the lease, new 15-year term with rental increases, options, 6 5-year options as well with increases, and it was a true triple net.
True triple net. So let's transition, George. Let's talk about this beautiful Carl's Jr. property, 611 Douglas Drive in Oceanside, that you got marketed on Crexy and I think LoopNet. Tell us a little bit about it. Is it triple net? How long is the remaining primary lease term? What is the rent? I think I saw it has some rental increases, but the seller would give like a credit, although I think said something about July, it was going up.
Yes. It's going up in July. I mean, it's a great location, great property. So, 611 Douglas, the thing about, like, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very much location driven because I'm risk adverse with my clients. Most of my clients are as well. In this particular property, you have a very strong franchisee that owns over 50 units. A lot of them are cross-collateralized on the lease here as well. In addition to that, the property itself is rare in that it's in Oceanside, but it's in an area of Oceanside that really doesn't have any other fast food restaurants because it's in a master plan community and one of the only fast food restaurants in the immediate area. And then you look at everything else that you have going for it. It's a 3,200 square feet. It appeals to multiple types of tenants. It's over half an acre, 25,000 square feet of land, 24,829 square feet of land. So it has abundant parking, a parking that you normally wouldn't see in most fast food restaurants. It's at over 9 per thousand parking ratios. So there's 9 spaces for every 1,000 square feet. We have, over about 30 parking spaces, over 31 parking spaces. There's a monument sign there. And, it's a full triple net lease. Now, the structure itself, there's only 5 years remaining on it. But I know it's a great location. You have good traffic counts. It goes up to the south entrance of Camp Pendleton. And, we're looking for, I think it's listed at $2.75 million, which translates to about a 4.58 cap rate. And, for something in Southern California, great location. I think it's hard to beat. Now, we actually originally took this out to market. Oh, goodness gracious. Back in, because you mentioned that, we took it out to market back in late February. In escrow with a owner user. Actually, to be frank with you, the tenant exercised the ROFO they had. So we know they want to stay. But then,
okay, well, that's a good thing. If they don't,
absolutely.
It's a great location if the tenant wants it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, they had to pull back because of right while we were about opening escrow, the whole coronavirus hit, and they weren't sure with what their capital requirements or needs were, so they wanted to pull back on any kind of acquisitions and free up any capital that they had. So with that in mind, we just put it back on the market about a month ago or so. It's still been a little bit slow, but actually picking up. So we have some interest on it right now.
I did crunch a couple numbers. I'm thinking, it's an awesome location. I love the location. And, I would think about $1,375,000 is kind of the loan we would do. And we would do like a 525. I'm thinking probably in the mid 4s.
Yeah.
495 for a 5-year with like a 25-year AM. And so you need somebody to come to escrow with like $1,375,000 plus costs. So, you may get an exchange buyer that's got to do, replace some debt. I'd love to look at this deal. It's right here in my backyard. But that's probably what you're looking at with the 6 years remaining. And it looks like an awesome location. I noticed that there's a Shell station or an Arco. Arco's right next to it. CBS is right there. Is there a common access with Carl's Jr. and CBS? And do they both kick in for that? And does that pass through each tenant on a pro forma basis, I guess, or on a?
It's actually the beautiful part is there's no landlord responsibilities. They actually take care of it. None at all. Any kind of common area, or as far as there's only one area that's a common area, that is the planter area and stuff next to the CVS. That's actually built directly back to the tenant, and they take care of it with the neighboring landlord.
And there is the ARCO, and I think you mentioned that you do have a no further action letter, and everything is how old's your phase one? Do you have an existing phase one on the property?
We had an old phase one from when it was acquired, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And they did have a basically no rec, and they had no recommended actions or further actions or investigations needed. So a clean phase one.
All right. And the best thing, all the agents want to know, what's the buy side commission on this deal?
No, we actually have one. We actually have one on this one. We're offering a 2% buy side commission on it.
Well, that's awesome. So 2% on, what's the price again?
2.75. So $5,000.
What is that commission wise? What is that on 2,750,000?
55,000.
55,000. That's a good commission. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very high.
Absolutely.
What do you think the probability of the tenant buying it, George? Do you think they're still going to try to go for it, or do you think?
I think they have. I think they have interest in it. I think that with the uncertainties of what is happening in the current environment with everything, I think now is kind of the perfect time for somebody who wants it to strike and be able to get it.
Okay.
And and either at a later date work something out with the tenant. Whether it's a new lease structure coming up in a few years when the options kick in, because the tenant's going to want a long-term lease as well, or turn around and sell it to them.
Can a buyer and lender get tenant guarantor financials and store sales? Will they disclose that, or is that something kind of question?
We don't have the store sales, but we should be able to get some of the financials on the company for the lender under a executed
non-disclosure agreement. Okay.
Non-disclosure. Yep.
So, what kind of terms do you think your seller would give a buyer as far as due diligence, financing, closing?
Because of the difficulty right now, I mean, the seller, the nice part is the seller's an old client of mine. I've sold him 6 buildings and sold a couple others for him as well. Because of the issues with getting people out and any kind of inspections for any type of due diligence, we're willing to, typically we'd say 21 days. We're probably looking at more realistically a 30-day.
30 days.
Even with the financing, probably extending that to a 45-day and then closing 10 days after that. So realistic.
Okay, that's reasonable. That's awesome. And is the tenant nearby as far as getting the SNDA? I mean, do you have
they're located actually down in the San Diego area.
Okay, so we can get the SNDA, the estoppel, insurance info. You got good communication with the tenant. Okay, awesome. What other properties are you marketing? Like, if there's any other buyers, do you have any other QSRs?
I don't have any other QSRs necessarily for sale. Looking for quite a few, but I do have two for lease.
Okay.
One I know for sure the owner won't sell. The other may consider a sale. So both are in LA County. One is a Old Church's Chicken in Inglewood. The other is a Wiener Schnitzel in Santa Monica. Both have drive-throughs, which are very rare. Looking for the right tenant and or potentially a buyer for one of them. The Monica location they can.
What's the Wiener Schnitzel? What's the Wiener Schnitzel priced at? What's the cap rate and the price on the Wiener Schnitzel?
Asking $190,000 a year ground rent for it.
Okay.
as far as a sale, I think this particular owner may actually consider it, but it'd have to have a number north of 4.
It's
So
a good location, huh?
But
Is it a very
if you count how many Santa Monica has amazing density, demographics, and when you count the number of fast food drive-through restaurants, you can't count all. You don't need both hands to count all of them. There's hardly any.
For sure.
So to actually have a fast food drive-through QSR type property in Santa Monica, it adds a ton of value. I mean, I know that an old Taco Bell on Lincoln Boulevard, at least to Chick-fil-A for more than 50% more rent than what we're asking on a smaller lot.
Jeez. No, I know that's a hot area for fast. LA is awesome. I love it. It's such a fun place. When I go to Beverly Hills, it's a lot of fun. There's awesome restaurants. There's cool people. You have all the stars, musicians. There's such a diverse, people, and which makes it great and a lot of fun. So how should somebody contact you? Should they send you LOI? Where can they get the marketing package on the? Actually, what I'll try to do is put a link to the marketing package in the description for this video, so they can just access the Carl's Jr. And then how can they call you on your cell phone?
Well, I always tell people that because I actually work in a high-rise, and for whatever reason, you would think technology today, the cell phones would get better, but I get horrible reception.
All right. So what's your main number?
All my clients call my office line. It actually pages me. So if I'm out of the office, it'll actually page me. So it's 310-943-8536. And then, or you can always email me at gpino@cbicommercial.com. So
that's great. George, my office is right at Wilshire and Beverly. I don't know if you know where the Montage is.
No.
Before I can meet with all your clients right there.
We've actually met with a client there. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
When did we there? Yeah. Did you come to my office?
A year ago with Jeslyn.
Okay, that's right. Oh,
yeah.
Now I remember. My mind's going. And she ended up buying like a Walgreens deal, didn't she? She bought something.
No. She actually had some other issues where she pulled back and was able to. Her up leg didn't quite, or down leg didn't quite go through.
Okay.
On her 1031.
Okay. So I thank you so much for being on NetLease TV. We're going to have some good footage of your Carl's Jr. Any buyers out there that need financing assistance on this property, any QSRs, any of the Walgreens, CVS, you can call us 760-479-0800. Our website, www.marabellafinance.com. Now, are you subscribed to NetLease TV? Are you subscribed?
Yes. Subscribe.
So subscribe, hit the subscribe button when you watch the video. That way, every time we do a new episode of NetLease TV, you're going to get an email. So everybody out there watching this, definitely hit subscribe and like this video. We really want the likes, so hit a lot of likes. That'll bring George more business, me more business. And thank you so much for watching NetLease TV. Thanks again, George, for being on. And I hope you sell this Carl's Jr. very quickly. Congratulations. It's a great property.